Hey, Shalom, Akim, Shabbat, Shalom, giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem, Makakadash. Double honors to the apostles and Eloh's great millstone for teaching us his truth and salutations to the sincere Akim and Aquatham. Listen, may the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Raquai, and back in here with another quick and Lord's will is always an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I wanted to go through some parallels between some of these endeavors being put forth by Trump, and looking to see if there was anything that Nero had done during his lifetime, to show you the parallels between the two, right? And what was it that they built, because now you're starting to see that with the nation in an economic downturn, with America in this economic downturn, Trump is having these, lavish ideas to, build this ballroom. And essentially, in terms of, priorities, this is not something that is very, very wise. This is not something that is very, if you're a wise ruler, that is, right? You know, if you're a wise ruler, your welfare, your mindset isn't focused on building all these lavish, ideas and endeavors, construction, buildings, and so on and so forth, right? So, what I did real quick, I went to Grok and I asked Grok on AI. Here it is. Let me pull it up. What were some of the luxury endeavors that Nero did during his rulership, and did the Romans suffer because of it, right? So this is what Grok gave me. So I want to read this out, and Lord's will is always, and this lesson will be edifying, right? And really and truly what inspired this is just looking at Trump's endeavors in regards to this ballroom, and here it is. You have your nation, your people, are you're in the midst of an economic downfall, because you shut down the government, and people are complaining about their wages. You're having lots of protests. You know what I'm saying? Like, so all these different problems that are going on in your society, and you're focusing on the lavishness, like, what I'm saying. You're going to other countries, like, by Venezuela. You have a beef with Venezuela, but the scriptures talk about how he's a man that is he is as death, and he's never satisfied, right? He is as hell, right? This is the type of person that Esau is, right? So he is not the type of person is unable to actually govern properly, but people look at him and esteem him as somebody. He's Trump, he's a billionaire, he's able to because he's a so-called a rich man in this society, right? So let me read this on Grok, right? So, as a matter of fact, let me first start off by saying this really was inspired by this ballroom, right? Project, that began in September 25, right? So let me go here. So it says Nero's major luxury endeavors. Nero ruled from 54 to 68 CE, which stands for Common Era, was notorious for extravagant projects and prioritized personal indulgence over the public welfare, often funded by heavy taxation, confiscations, and debasement of the currency. And that's something that he did also, because if when you go into Revelation, the 6th chapter, it talks about measure of wheat for a penny. And when you go into that word penny, the word there is denarion, which refers to the coin denarius, right? That was the principal coin, the principal silver coin, I should say, during the Roman Empire. And during that time, in order to make certain adjustments to the economy, Nero, he began to debase the currency. So debase essentially means to he began to mix the silver content, it being, I know it was over like 95%, but let's just say if it was 95%, you begin to mix it essentially with inferior metals. So it's no longer as high as a silver content um, coin as it used to, right? So just to show you, some of the things is, well, basically is handiwork, right? Right. So what does that do? It allows, more coins, to be made and to be able to pay for more expenditures, but the cost of things are going to be a lot more expensive, right? So it says here are some of the examples drawn from the historians like Suetonius, Tacitus, and Cassius, right? So this is the Domus Aurea, right? So this is that's where you get the English domicile, or the French word domicile, aurea, gold, right? So the golden house, and that's what I have as the picture on the screen here. That was one of his lavish, extravagant projects. So it says, after the great fire in Rome in CE, Nero may have exploited, though he wasn't proven to have started it. He had built a massive palace complex spanning about 200 to 300 acres across the central Rome, including the Palatine, the Esquiline, and the Scalian hills. Right, so it says features, and it says artificial lake, 300 rooms of gold leaf ceilings, ivory decorations, frescoes by Fabulous, rotating dining rooms, piped in perfumes. Described Suetonius. I think he was an historian. Described it as a golden house with vaults and encrusted with gems. So you start to see the lavishness of a person, who's ruling, right? So it says here extravagant parties and performances, and it says hosted lavish banquets on floating platforms in the Agrippa Lake or his palace, with feasts lasting days, featuring exotic foods, peacock tongues, nightingales. Let me actually look that up. Hold on. Nightingales. Hold on. Let me look that up. Okay, so a nightingale is essentially, it's a type of bird. So it's known for its powerful and beautiful song, right? So just to get more understanding, so you got expensive birds, you got wine mixed with roses, you got entertainment by the thousands of performers. It says Nero himself performed publicly as an actor, right? And I think that's something actually that Trump also did during the 90s. I know he appeared on that what's that show? Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, singer charioteer. It says for example, the Neronia games introduced in 60 CE, modeled after the Greek festivals. So like essentially like his own version of the different games. He had that for himself, right? So Trump is when you see the behavior of how Trump behaves, I think he even has a golden statue. Hold on, let me look this up. Just the golden statue of Trump. 1 second. This was introduced in September 2025. Okay, yeah, so it is a real, yes, it is a real thing. Let's see where it is. Okay, so you have one that's displayed outside of the U.S. Capitol, right? You have him holding a Bitcoin, right? So let's just get more of this. As a matter of fact, let me read this here. This is Second Ezra chapter 12, verse 13, and it says, "Behold, the days will come when that there shall be a kingdom upon the earth, and it shall be feared above all the kingdoms that were before it, and in the same 12 kings reign one after the other," right? So there was a period in time, where a kingdom would rise up, and then you have these different kings that would kind of they would reign one after the other. So these different kings refer to these 12 Caesars, right? And Nero just happens to be one of them, belonging to the Julio-Claudian dynasty. So you had essentially the first six, so from Julius up until Nero, you had the first six that's the first dynasty, and then you had the Flavian dynasty, right, where you get your last few Caesars, such as Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian, right? So those were like your primary 12 of those Roman Caesars. Of course, you had other Caesars that came and ruled after them, right? When you get people such as Marcus Aurelius, Septimius Severus, his son Caracalla, those were Caesars that came later on after the fact, right? But this is primarily focused on those 12 Caesars here, right? And also, what's it called? Okay, moving on. Okay, let's go here. So it says, okay, so it says Greek tour and cultural imports, and it says in Greece he ordered the cutting of the isthmus of Corinth Canal, abandoned unfinished, and freed the province of Achaia from taxes temporarily to gain favor. Imported Greek athletes, artists, luxuries, built theaters, gymnasia in Rome to host Greek-style events. So it was all about living a very lavish lifestyle, right? It says, did Romans suffer because of it? And it says, yes, significantly. So as I mentioned before, this would, if you're somebody who was living during that time, and you know that your ruler debased the value of the currency, now you're not going to earn as much money as you would, before the debasement, right? It was going to take a lot more of those coins, to earn a substantial amount of living, right? So it says, so one of the things that happened, it says economic burden, heavy taxes on provinces such as the Gaul, which is like modern day like France area, Britain, Asia, led to revolts on Boducas in Britain. It says 70,000 plus Romans and Romans died partly due to the resentment over the loans and taxes over Nero's funding Nero's projects. Right. So look at this. This is the sentiment here. The sentiment is that people are feeling very, very neglected and resentful, right? And just to show you what's happening right now, because of where Trump is placing a lot of his priorities, that is going to cause a little, I shouldn't say a little, but it's going to cause a lot of resentment towards, his own people, because here it is, your focus is not on essentially trying to help the people, right? This is why a lot of people are feeling very disgruntled, especially economically, right? You're taking those earnings that those taxes from the people, whether it might be property taxes or land taxes or any kinds of taxes, and then you're using it to fund all these different lavish projects, right? This is something I was thinking about recently. There's been a lot of protests in regards to a lot of like politicians, right? And what does that fuel? That fuels that sentiment in 2nd Ezra, the 15th chapter, where they won't regard their kings or their princes. They don't want these people in rulership, because this is why because people are mourning, right? So let me get that. Where was I? Just bear with me on this. Let's go to 2nd Ezra. This is Second Ezra chapter 15, verse 16, and it says, "For there shall be sedition among men and invading one another. They shall not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions shall stand in their power." Right? This is verse 19. It says, "A man shall have no pity upon his neighbor, but shall destroy their houses with the sword and spoil their goods because of the lack of bread and for great tribulation." Right? So this is the vibration this is creating. Because things are becoming a lot more expensive, Trump is not actually trying to take care of the welfare of his own people, because a king is supposed to be able to have proper and sound judgment, and one of the things that King Solomon prayed for was actually wisdom, but Trump is the type of person, Esau is the type of person, they magnify themselves as to be like the Most High, right? Let me see if there was any more. Okay, here. And oh, let me get Proverbs. Actually, I didn't get that. This is Proverbs chapter 29, verse 2, and it says, "When the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn." This is the type of an individual that Trump is, that Esau is, because everybody's mourning. You have a bunch of substance, but you're hoarding a lot of the substance for yourselves, and you're screwing with people's labor. In a society that was righteous, you would actually pay people that same day. You wouldn't actually hold on to their earnings, because you don't know what these people actually need that money for, right? Let me Okay, let me get that point. Okay, this is Deuteronomy 24, verse 14. And it says, "Thou shalt not oppress an hired servant that is poor and needy, whether he be of thy brethren or of thy strangers that are in thy land, within the gates." Right? So referring to your own kin. At his day thou shalt give him his hire, neither shall the sun go down upon it, for he is poor, and setteth his heart upon it, lest he cry against thee, unto the Lord, and it be a sin unto thee, right? So there was a manner and a way we were supposed to actually take care of, the people, of our own people, right? But the scriptures talk about, why shouldest thou essentially hatest instruction. To roughly paraphrase, Esau is not the type of person to, they profess themselves to be all righteous, but when you look at the works thereof, you see that their works are in vain. Their works are not actually conducive to life. This is why the law is very strongly needed to actually properly govern the planet, govern the earth, because Esau is not the type of person to actually keep this mind frame. Why? Because he has knowledge, but he doesn't have wisdom, because he doesn't fear the Heavenly Father, right? Okay, I want to go back to Grok here. So did the Romans suffer because of it? So, okay, so here's the debasement portion, and it says, "Current debasement reduced the silver in the Nero by 10 to 15% to fund expensive, causing inflation." It says, "Post-fire reconstruction prioritized domus aurea over housing." So he prioritized the luxury living. Many Romans lived in slums, while Nero's palace displaced from public spaces. And this is something that you've seen more and more. not just with Trump. I'm kind of aiming more in focusing more on Trump, but you start to see that a lot more with other presidents of other countries across the world, right? So, so most recently, you had that situation in Mexico. A couple weeks before, you had that situation in I believe it was Nepal. You had it in Bangladesh, where the people essentially are storming the luxury spaces of these different presidents and different um, rulers, and they're going into those spaces, and they're essentially they're taking their vengeance, right? Because they're fed up, they're being oppressed. They're not regarding their kings, for the way that they're handling certain affairs, right? The king is supposed to be able to handle certain affairs in a righteous sense to make sure people are taken care of, right? But you see, they are not doing that because they're taking on the spirit of Esau, which is somebody who's just a niggard, right? A person who's a niggard just hoards all the resources for themselves and leaving the people to kind of just, fend for themselves. They don't see themselves, they see themselves as the Most High. They don't see themselves as merely being a taskmaster who's just watching over the servants, watching over the people, watching over, the servants, right? So this is political and social fallout. It says here elite resentment. It says confiscated senatorial states. Okay, so it says public discontent, bread shortages. Oh, I just read that. Bread shortages and high cost. The fire left 75% of Rome homeless. And Nero land grabs worsened it, right? You've been having a lot of different plagues, and it's being used as a land grab to get people's land. Remember what happened in Biden and Hawaii? I'll say it like that, right? The scriptures say we are not ignorant of Satan's devices, right? And it says military neglect. It says funds diverted from legions, votes in 68 CE, in Vindex in Gaul, Galba in Spain, cited Nero's extravagance as a grievance. He was declared a public enemy and committed, suicide, right? So it says here, while Nero had early popularity, tax reliefs, games, his later luxuries drained the treasury about 2.2 sesterces. Oh, let me look this up. Hold on. Let me just look this up real quick. Sesterce. Okay. So sesterce is a ancient Roman coin and monetary unit equal to 1/4 of a denarius. So it's about, so essentially it's about 1/4 of the denarius, right? So essentially it's just basically one of the ancient Roman coins, right? So essentially there was a deficit, and he committed suicide, right? So that's pretty much it. Just to show you some parallels between some of the things that Nero is doing and some of the things Trump was doing, and what is the sentiment and that backlash that was occurring back then, because a lot of the things that was happening back then are playing out right now. This is why a lot of people are very, very disgruntled over Trump's administration, right? So let me get a couple more precepts and I'll just close it here. This is Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 9, and it says, the thing that hath been is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun. Verse 10, is there anything whereof it may be said, see, this is new, it hath already been of old time, which was before us. So all these different events, occurrences, America has taken on that spirit of the Roman Empire, right? The way that they ruled, the practice of inauguration, all that comes from ancient Rome, right? That was a very, very common, you learn there's the Latin, so on and so forth, like all, the Senate, the way they quote unquote elect, certain put people into those positions, as opposed to a monarchy. A monarchy was more about, okay, if I have a son and I pass away and my son is groomed to eventually rule. That's what made Rome vastly different from all those previous different empires, right? Because it was based on, people being put in those positions, and they were known as Caesars, right? Just like today, you have from George Washington up until now, you have Donald Trump, right? They have these different people that are put in those particular positions to fulfill that role. They're inaugurated, and that was a custom of the Romans, right? Which goes back to augury, right? It was a practice of, somebody who was like essentially like an author, not an author, an augur, right? Who was a soothsayer who used to observe the behavior of birds, right? So, say for example, this person would be standing, and they say, okay, they saw 5 birds flying together. Okay, five years of peace this year, right? So this is how they used to, perform their certain rituals back then, and America has taken on that vibration and adopted it into their own culture, right? So this is a revival. Let's just show that this is a revival of Rome all over again. The Caesars are not doing, the Caesars, with a lot of the things the Caesars did, a lot of these presidents are doing right now, right? So the other one, okay, I want to go to Sirach on this one, just to solidify the point on, you're oppressing the poor. Because it mentioned, one of the last points it mentioned here was the fact that after the fire, a lot of people were kind of left homeless, and then bread shortages. This is what it said here, right? So I have a precept for that. This is this is Sirach 34, verse 22, and it says, "The bread of the needy is their life, and he that defraudeth him thereof is a man of blood. He that taketh away his neighbor's living slayeth him, and he that defraudeth the laborer of his hire is a bloodshedder." So, you're supposed to be, using that money to be able to take care of the welfare of your people, right? But you see what that which is then is now, the whole ballroom situation. You're supposed to be using that money, and even to add insult to injury even more, you take a lot of those those funds, and you ostracize your own people. So therefore, instead of taking care of your own citizens, you're taking care of, a lot of these people that are coming in, refugees, right? And this is causing a rift. This is causing Egyptian against Egyptian, because they're getting more treatment than your own people who have been here, right? So that's pretty much it. I didn't really want to. Oh, let me get this last one. I swear this is the last one. I didn't bring out this earlier. Just to show you the type of mind frame a ruler is supposed to be in. This is Deuteronomy 17, verse 15. I said it, and it says, "Thou shalt in any wise set him a king over thee, whom the Lord thy power shall choose. One from among thy brethren shall be set king over thee. Thou mayest not set a stranger over thee, which is not thy brother," right? So we're supposed to have, we're honestly not supposed to have, heathens ruling over us, and this is one of the reasons why, right? And it says, verse 16, "And he shall not multiply horses unto himself, caused the people to return to Egypt, to the end that he should multiply horses, for as much as the Lord Yahweh hath said unto you, he shall henceforth return no more that way. Neither shall he multiply wives unto himself, that his heart turn away, neither shall he greatly multiply himself silver and gold. It shall be, when he sitteth upon the throne of his kingdom, he shall write him a copy of this law in the book, out of that which is before the priests, the Levites, right? So because those things were important, because when he's ruling, he's supposed to keep his mind upon the laws of the Heavenly Father, so how to essentially govern properly, govern having a fear of Yahweh Bashim Shai, right? So you start to see through these different governments, not just Trump, but Trump for the sake of this lesson, but as a whole, these rulers don't manage their welfare of their society properly, because they're not operating on a frequency or understanding the Heavenly Father's ways. The scriptures talk about how his ways are higher than our ways, and our thoughts than his thoughts, right? So our thoughts are not on a level of the Heavenly Father, right? So that's pretty much it. But I sincerely hope and pray that this lesson was edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashim Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.